having grown up in an environment where there's a lot of stigmas or a lot of perceived attitudes towards towards blacks. A lot of it's ignorance, but just hearing it, feeling it, seeing it around me, and I think I internalized some of that. Some of those feelings. I realized at some point that I would look in the mirror. When I was younger, I did this as a teenager. I'd look in the mirror and I would literally ask Hashem. I'd say, "Why? Why do I have to be black when everybody around me isn't?"
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today is a very special individual. His name is Rabbi Yossi Kulek. Rabbi Kulek, thank you so much for joining us. Rabbi Kulek is Thank you. Rabbi Kulek is director of the University of Hartford, where he lives with his wife and 7 children. He is also a Chabad chaplain, and he's a member of the God Squad, contributing to cultural diversity and belonging at the university. Rabbi Kulek is also biracial, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about his experiences. Rabbi Kulek, tell us a little about your background.
Where do you want me to begin?
Wherever you'd like.
Okay. So I guess my story begins in Cleveland, Ohio. My mother was a studious young teenager, and for her first few years of high school, that's all she really did was stuck in the books. And she wanted to be more popular in the in crowd, so to speak. And along the way, she met this. She tells me this charming, good-looking African American, who, sure enough, he was the life of the party. Got her involved in all kinds of events and parties, and she's having a good time. She fell in love, and even though she was very, very young, she had in her mind that she wanted to have a baby, and that this was the right person to have it with.
So she went from the studious girl to a person who was having all this fun with this Black
Well,
American.
she's, my mother. I think she always kept her studies, from what I understand. I don't think she stopped studying, but now she was having fun and felt
popular.
more like an in girl, or with the more popular people. And so she's hanging out with Robert, this African American from the Cleveland neighborhood, and she falls in love, and she gets pregnant. And once she got pregnant, it wasn't as easy or as pretty as she thought it would be. He started treating her differently.
So your mother was Jewish. Did she have like any connection to her heritage at all? Or
no, that's a good question. I think my grandmother occasionally would buy kosher meat from the kosher butcher, which might have had meat from Rebbe Kazin, who was the pioneer shliach in Cleveland, Ohio. But she didn't know the Chabad. She didn't know the Kazins. My mother didn't know anything about anything. They were a middle class American family. My grandfather was a factory worker. They had really no connection with the frum community, besides the fact that they knew that they were European Jewish, both her great grandparents.
What was your grandmother's reaction to her becoming pregnant?
It's a good question. It seems to me, from what I'm told, is that, and it makes sense knowing my grandparents, that they were just they weren't the type to be disciplinarians or tough or angry. They were very supportive. They definitely didn't give her a hard time about not dating somebody non-Jewish or dating somebody black. They were going to actually sign for her, even though she wasn't 18. They were willing to sign for her to get married. They had plans to go to City Hall and stuff.
So how old was she? She was 17 at the time?
My mother was 17 when she gave birth to me, correct? And,
oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So what happens next?
What happens next is Robert starts mistreating my mother. He starts getting physical with her, getting violent. He was drinking a lot, cheating on her, and verbally abusing her, just making her life a living hell.
Mm.
She really felt that she was in love. She didn't want to end it or leave, as we see sometimes or often with women who are involved with domestic abuse.
Mhm.
She thought she could make it work and thought he was the right one. But that was the first time, she says, in her life that she started to pray, that she started
Oh, wow. Mm.
to ask God, whoever you are, wherever you are, to please help Robert love me, and that everything should be beautiful and that everything should work
Mm.
out. So that was, I mean, she says, the first time she really tapped into any form of prayer.
Wow, she must have felt so alone.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. So this was before she had the baby, before she had you, or this was after that he
It sounds to me like during the pregnancy already things were not so
were not
great.
go yeah.
When she gave birth to me, my understanding is that she was still physically at home with my grandparents, but that my biological father, that Robert, used to come around a lot. He was there all the time. I don't know if he was living there. It's not so clear to me.
Mhm.
Um, I don't usually like to pry too much, but with my mother,
Mhm.
but it sounds to me like they were pretty much together.
Mhm.
And then things, for her at least, hit the pinnacle, or it became a type of a day of self reflection for her. When I was 6 months old, he walks in and sees my grandmother holding me and starts screaming and yelling at her, and tells
Mm.
her, "I don't want you to ever touch my child. Keep your hands off of him." And my mother, who was very close to her parents and really, very close to her mother, saw that. She saw the hurt in her eyes. She saw how it impacted her, and saw how much she was hurt. And she tells me that even though she was able to endure for herself, and she just,
Mhm.
figured it'd always get better for herself, when she started to see how much it was hurting her family and other people, she said, "I have to make a change." And at that point, she
Wow.
made the decision that she told my grandmother, "I'm ready, and I'm ready to leave, help me get out of here."
Hmm. So how would she get away from him? Like, how would that happen?
Well, that story actually goes back a little earlier. My uncle Maish, who now lives in Israel, married and lives in Israel, but at the time, he was a young, eccentric guy, a little different. He loved wearing red.
Mm.
I don't know. Even as a kid growing up, I remember him always wearing red. His red yarmulke, his red shirt, his red pants.
Hmm.
That was his shtick. But he's on the streets in the summer of 1975.
So this is your mother's brother, right?
Correct, her
Yeah.
eldest brother. She has
Mhm.
two brothers. This was her oldest brother,
Mhm.
and he was walking the streets of Cleveland, downtown Cleveland, and it's Chabad yeshiva students, rabbinical students, came up to him and asked him if he'd
Mm.
like to put on tefillin, if he's Jewish. He said, "Yeah," and he himself was like, "These guys are my type of guys. I mean, look at that. They have such pride that they don't care what people think of them. They're wearing their hats, their jackets in 90-degree weather,
Mm.
beards." And he really connected with them. It really felt something. So he
Mm.
started hanging out at the Chabad of Cleveland with the Levskis and their Chabad house, and
Mm.
that's eventually became his second home. I mean, he was there all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and so when it comes, so flash forward, I'm 6 months old in 1976, and my grandmother's trying to help my mother get out of there and get into a safer situation. She starts calling domestic abuse shelters, and not one shelter would take my mother because she wasn't 18 yet. They said, "We
Oh.
can't take her."
Mhm.
So feeling a little hopeless, they knew of Chabad. They just knew that these were Jewish rabbis that were helping my uncle, or that he was studying with. So they gave a call and asked, "Hey, can you help us out?" So Mrs. Dvoralevsky said, "No problem." She immediately said yes. Took my mother and 6 month old baby into the house,
Into her own
and
house.
into their own house. We
Wow.
were literally in their house. Years later, I spoke to, he's also Chabad on campus, Shliach Mendy Alevsky. He told me he had no idea. Parents never told him, but
Wow.
but uh, but 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 he did confirm it with his mother, and that my mother, once I was in that house, once my mother was exposed to Yiddishkeit, to Judaism, she really felt, hey, this is something I want for Yossi. This is what I want for my little son. That I want to
Mm.
raise him to be Jewish. I want him to know what it means, and that was something she like just embraced, and there was no questions for her.
Mm.
So when Mrs. Alevsky saw how enamored my mother was, all the questions she was asking, and how involved she was, and how much she seemed to be embracing it. She asked her, "Would you like to learn more? Would you like to go to New York and study in yeshiva in Mechon Chana?"
Mm.
And mother agreed, and they helped. They bought her a one-way ticket to Crown Heights on a Greyhound bus, and sent her and her little baby to Crown Heights, to the unknown.
Wow.
Um, a little side note that I just literally found out a few days ago was that Mrs. Alevsky told me that my mother insisted on paying back that ticket, even though
Wow.
they told not to worry about it.
Hmm.
So my mother got a job. She saved up the money, and then
How long was she
and
at
then
Mrs. Zalewski's house?
I don't know exactly, a few weeks. I
A
don't
few
know
weeks.
exactly, but
Wow.
a
With
few
you.
weeks.
And so she was going by herself to New York City to what? I mean, she must have trusted the
Well,
Levski tremendously.
she must have. It doesn't. I don't think there was that much in place. There was a lot of
Mhm.
things that had to work out once she got to New York.
Mhm.
There were different families along the way that took us into their home for a day here, 2 days, until they found an apartment, until they were able to make the arrangements. Because it was in because my Mechon Chana, as open and as embracing as Chabad is, I don't think there's any seminary that can take a mother and a 6-month-old baby into their dormitory.
Right.
So,
Machal Chana is the women's seminary in Crown Heights for women who wanna pursue their Jewish education, but I guess they couldn't take a little six-month-old baby there, right?
right. She had to find a basement. She found somewhere to stay. Um, she eventually, I think, the first. I mean, after bouncing around a little bit, it was also right around when she when she came to New York. She was just turning 18. It was Shavuot. It was a holiday, and that was going into the summer. So I know she spent that summer in the bungalows.
Mm.
Um, she was. It sounds to me like that summer she spent with some of the Kazan's daughters who were in Crown Heights, the Langs, Kotlarsky. I think they were
These
the
are
families that
families of the Levskis.
these
These are
are
relatives.
these are relatives of the Lesky. They're sisters of the Leskys, but
Mhm.
the children of the Kazan Rabbi Mrs. Kazan in Cleveland, and
So
they
they
together with
introduced her. They didn't just leave her in New York. They really introduced her to the
yeah,
whole
of course.
family. Right, okay.
Yes, it sounds like yes, all of the
Right.
family, I guess, got involved, and
Mhm.
other families. There were a lot of families, Baruch Hashem, thank God, that that embraced the Rebbe's mission of love and bringing us in and including us in the community, and
Mm.
they brought us in.
Wow. And then what happens? Did Robert ever go after her to find her or
He did, but first my mother wanted to pay back that ticket that she had gotten from Mrs.
right,
Alevsky. So she has a
right.
job, she saves up the money, and her first time with, I mean, girl, I guess a naive girl from Cleveland, she's carrying her cash to the ATM or bank, whatever it was, ATM, and she gets mugged. It was all taken
Mm.
from her. That was her experience already in
Wow.
her first couple of months there. But
Mhm.
so she just went back to work, saved the money, and sent the Leskys the money for that ticket. It was very important to her. Robert was looking for me. He was looking for me for a few years. Actually, pretty much up until my mother got married when I was 4,
Mm.
and at that point he kind of disappeared.
Mm.
Um, at the time, my grandmother told my mother that she thought she'd seen in the news that he had been shot or that he'd been killed. That she thought he was, and my mother, for years, we thought, okay, he was killed. He wasn't alive. Um, but I found out years later that he himself spent a few years in jail, and I mean, by the time he got out, we were long gone.
Wow. Did you ever meet up with him or hear about him?
Um, I didn't meet him in person. My I've gone through a journey myself. If you would have asked me 10 years ago or to do this interview, I would have said no.
Mm.
So I really had to do my own discovery and my own soul searching and figure out who I am and my role and my place beyond. I mean, as a shliach of the Rebbe, I should say, as an emissary of the Rebbe. I don't. It's a combination of not thinking that he was alive, not thinking necessarily that it was important, But
Mm.
at some point, when I started to really do some soul searching and better understand my own feelings of who I am and where I belong, I did start looking for him. I started, Googling and searching, and I eventually found him. I found out that he was in Texas, but I still didn't. I couldn't find a contact number. I couldn't find a phone number for him. So excuse me. So the next step for me was I had one of my Chabad on campus alum from University of Hartford was getting married in Cleveland.
Mm.
And I make it a point, if I can, I try to go to our alumni simchas. That's really, to me, the Paris. That's the fruit that we bear fruit when we see our students marrying Jewish and continuing on, continuing on our traditions and our legacy, and the Jewish chain. So when I was in town for that one day, I made an effort, and I tracked down one of Robert's brothers,
Mm.
and I met with the brother in his apartment. It was a friendly visit. He showed me a few pictures, and he asked me. I don't know. I
How
guess
old were you? How old were you at this point? Around like a few
this is
years ago,
several years ago.
right?
How old was I?
I mean, you're already
I'd have to
married
do.
at this point. You're already married with your
I'm
own.
probably, I mean, it was probably after I was 40 already. So, yeah, it
Okay,
was. I'd have to
right,
do the math when
right, right,
Leah got married, but it was
right,
several years ago.
right.
Um, and at that point, but I gave, because we whatever meeting, whatever, I gave him my number. I didn't necessarily say much about it, but that was it. I left. Um, and a week later, I got a phone call from Robert. Asking me if I knew who it was. I realized right away who it was. I said
Mm.
yes. And the first thing we really came up was how he treated my mother.
Mm.
And he admitted, he acknowledged it right away. He told me very simply what he had done,
Mm.
and he said he had regrets, but
Mm.
I had to really figure that out. It was something that
Mm.
I had to figure out. Um, when I told my mother knew that I'd started, trying to find out this little piece of me, and I was doing some searching. Um, but when I told my mother, she panicked.
Mm.
Um, Her reaction really shocked me. I didn't realize, and she didn't realize. She didn't realize how much trauma had been buried. She left Cleveland when she was 17, 18 years old,
Wow.
and never turned back. But there was no therapy, no counseling, no. She never dealt with
Sure.
her. She never dealt with her trauma.
Mm.
Anyhow, she did. So I put things on hold for a little bit, but
Mm.
she came back to me a few weeks later and told me that, which she's always been. She told me that she completely supported my journey, and told me, if I want to go meet him, or if no, I should do what I have to do, and that
Mhm.
I shouldn't feel that she was an obstacle.
Mhm.
Somewhere in my conversation with my mother, she did tell me also that my father, my adopted father, the only father that I have had since I was 4, um, had commented and was surprised that I wanted to go interact or meet with someone or talk to someone who had hurt my mother.
Mm.
And he's like, and he made some comment like he doesn't get why, he doesn't understand. Like, I have a family. Um, what's the issue?
Mhm.
And and my But I realized something a lot deeper over there. My father's a quiet guy. He won't say. He's very, very humble. Won't say much about himself. But I realized that I was really hurting him. He was really hurt that he felt like, you have
Mhm.
a father. Like, what are you missing? What are you looking for?
Right.
So that took also for me to really process. But I came to peace with that. I realized, thank God I do have. I mean, I knew it then too, but I do have a beautiful family.
Mhm.
I had told that to Robert when I spoke to him. I said, "I don't need you." I said,
Mhm.
I said, "I have a beautiful family. I have, I didn't want to give too much information. I said, I have a big family, siblings, children. I said, I'm not, I don't really need to expand on that. It's not
Mhm.
something. I don't feel like there's something missing in my life.
Mhm.
But there was two things going on here. As far as my own family is concerned, yes, thank God I have. I'm the oldest of 12 siblings.
Wow.
Kanai thank God. I think I personally lost track. I'm a little embarrassed, but I think my mother and father have over 40 grandchildren. Thank God.
Wow.
And
Wow.
my daughter had their first great grandchild.
Wow.
Um,
Beautiful.
so Baruch Hashem, right? So Baruch Hashem, we're complete.
Right.
Um, but I had to be complete inside. I really had
Mm.
to figure out something, and there was a realization to what was my problem,
Mm.
and what I was looking for. My real problem was that, having grown up in an environment where there's a lot of stigmas, or a lot of perceived attitudes towards towards blacks. A lot of it's ignorance, but just hearing it, feeling it, seeing it around me, and knowing.
Mhm.
And I think I internalized some of that, some of those feelings.
Mhm.
So the big key word is I realized at some point I would look in the mirror. When I was younger, I did this as a teenager. I'd look in the mirror and I would literally ask Hashem. I'd say, "Why? Why do I have to be black when everybody around me is? Why
Mhm.
can't I just be like my siblings? Why can't I just be like everybody else?"
Mhm.
And I was able to process that. Good therapist too, but I was able to process that
Mhm.
many years later. Um, in the last dozen years, I'd say, where I realized that I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the black side in me, and I had to really come to terms with that. I had to really figure out my feelings, figure out why I was ashamed, and figure out how to believe in myself, and how to be proud of who I am and where I come from.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So I wanna ask you more about that, but before I ask you about that, let's just go back to the story, 'cause, how did you get to your adopted father, to the father that your mother married? Go back to the story. You're living in Crown Heights, and your mother is learning about Judaism and embracing it, and then she decides to what? To marry.
Well, every young girl in the
Of
religious
course.
community, at some point or another, people are going to say to them, "Hey, don't you want to get married?" I think something that's also been a very big part of what I believe, and in
Mm,
my what I teach my students at the University of Hartford, is that Yiddishkeit and Judaism is all about family.
sure.
We're really a family centric faith, and as such, my mother started dating, and of course, for her, everything really did evolve around me, and she needed to find someone who she felt would be able to love me and embrace me.
Mhm,
And she found a young yeshiva student who was studying uh, at the yeshiva for those who want to know more about Judaism, Hadar Torah.
mhm.
And they met when I was, I guess, about 4 years old. Um, and they decided that they were bashert, that they were meant to be. And 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 he ended up, embracing me
Being
fully.
right. And you took his name, I guess his name is Kulek?
Yeah, he fully adopted me by the time I was age 6. My father's happens to be a lawyer, but by age 6 already, he fully adopted me. Like I said, Robert wasn't in the picture and
Mm,
couldn't even be tracked down, so there was no opposition.
mhm,
And but that was, my mother and father getting married was also a pinnacle point in my life. I mean, it really set the tone for who I am today, and that is because when my parents got engaged, they it was in 1981. You were still able to have a private audience with the Rebbe when you got engaged, for a bracha, for a blessing, uh, for good marriage.
mhm,
And my parents made a unique decision. On the one hand, they decided they weren't going to include me in any of the wedding festivities or the wedding activities. They didn't want me in the pictures. They wanted that when I would grow up, that I just be one of the kids. They didn't want,
mhm,
my siblings to look at me differently, and it worked. It did.
mhm,
But on the other hand, they said, if we're going to the Rebbe, we're going to bring Yossi with us, and they brought me with them.
mm,
And that experience, I have only a few memories from when I was 4 years old. That's one vivid memory that has really, really stuck with me. I have this vivid memory standing with my parents behind me. I'm in front of them. The Rebbe's big wooden desk is in front of me. I remember it being bigger than me, or I was looking over the
Right.
desk. The Rebbe leaning over the desk down towards me and smiling. And we had a conversation about my tzitzis. Um,
Wow.
and he was asking me how many strings I have, and I guess I wasn't really talking much. So he's asking me one, I said yes, two, up to eight, and I said yes. That's what I remember. But that interaction, that famous smile, and the way from from every moment. I mean, that's my first earliest memory of interacting with the Rebbe. It was love. It was
Hmm.
something very special.
Wow. Did that help you? I mean, you said you had this time period about 12 years ago where you just had to relearn about yourself and to reaccept yourself. Do you think those moments helped you, or what did help you to become who you became?
So that's a good question, and I was actually thinking about that myself recently. Um, I think the Rebbe helped me. I mean, everything that I have is from the Rebbe, but I think as far as my journey being biracial, what the having the Rebbe and knowing the Rebbe's message that every Jew is a diamond, and the Rebbe's vision of Avas Yisrael, to love your fellow, and just the Rebbe's the interactions, and every moment that was special with the Rebbe, it made me feel that I was on the right path. It made me. I believed in the Rebbe. I believed in the Rebbe's teachings.
Mhm.
I love Hasidus, and there was no question to me that the Rebbe was the truth. There was no question to me that what the Rebbe was teaching us was the right emes, and was what is the real deal. I had no doubts about that.
Mhm.
My What I needed to come to terms with is I had to figure out that um, that it wasn't just a matter of the Rebbe loving me despite my flaws.
Mhm.
Because for years, yes, I believed in the Rebbe. I believed in Torah mitzvahs. I believed in what the Rebbe's vision for this world. But maybe I was blemished. Maybe I was still flawed.
Mhm.
I don't think that detracts from the Rebbe's greatness to say that the Rebbe is fantastic, but I'm flawed. I have
Right.
problems.
Right.
Um, so so that's what I had to come into terms with more recently. That's what I had to really start exploring. Um, am I complete, or
Right. Wow.
is my neshama complete? I guess I should say
Right.
more specifically.
Is your soul complete? Wow. And what made you feel that it wasn't? Do you think it was like reactions to people in the community or your childhood? Did you have reactions of people? Did you have racist comments growing up? What was that like?
Yeah, yes and yes. My first experience that I remember, and I've been, even now I've been thinking through my years. My first There were experiences when I was much younger that I didn't process till many years later. I didn't even realize that I was being mistreated or treated differently. It didn't register. But by the time I was 9, 10 years old, I did start picking up on things. My
Mhm.
first experience was my mother, um, who, when I was young, when I was uh, 5, we moved to Illinois. And when I was by age 6, we moved to the Chicago Restauranters Park community.
Mhm.
And for my mother, for her 40 plus years in Chicago, um, doing Mitzvahim, going out with Neshei Chabad, with the women of Chabad, and trying to meet people and help people and inspire people, has it, it was a part and core of what my mother is. And
Mhm.
she always, every before every Yom Tov or on every Yom Tov, she would go sit by in front of storefronts and greet people and give out the candle lighting kits and give out holiday brochures, mezuzah, whatever she can do to try to spread the Rebbe's mitzvahim, the Rebbe's campaigns. So it's Sukkot, and I'm about 9 years old, and my mother encouraged me to take the lulav and etrog and to go stand in front of this Jewish style restaurant called the Bagel.
Mhm.
Standing in front of the Bagel, and this older gentleman is walking into the restaurant, or walking out of the restaurant. And I ask him, "Would you like to make a blessing on Are you Jewish? He looked at me. I remember looking down at me, and he laughed, and he said, I look more Jewish than you. And that stuck.
Sure.
Um, my mother's always felt my pain, and I know she never forgot that either.
Sure.
We've talked about that a number of times. But after that, there were other experiences. Whether it was
So that
going up to
that was really from a stranger. Were there experiences for people from your peers or people in your community?
that was from a stranger within my immediate community, within certainly within the Chabad Lubavitch community of West Rogers Park. I always felt loved. I
Mm.
really, my class, we were the oldest class of Cheder Lubavitch in Chicago. And as such, we had all the rookie Rebbes, all the rookie teachers. So they had a really hard time with us as a group. We were perhaps not the most best behaved group of kids, but I did well academically. I was given a lot of opportunities. I used to love going up on stage and singing for different things. I was asked to do the menorah lighting in Daily Plaza, and I was I loved my community,
Mm.
and not just my community. It was very unique. I wish it was more like that today as well. But in Cheder Lubavitch, Chicago, the oldest class that I was in was a very diverse class. We had kids from from the more from different sectors of the Jewish community.
Mm.
And for example, my best friends growing up in childhood were the Soloveitchik family,
Mm.
who were really brisk yeshiva. They were not really part of Chabad, but they too they became very close to me, and they embraced me as well. So within my immediate community, I was sheltered to the point that when I started to experience from maybe within the Jewish community, but not my community, from like
Mhm.
the edges, from people, from kids that would meet me in the park, or kids that would meet me at some summer program. Um, my friends and we, of course, yes, I try to block out some of it, but yes, I was. There were the racial slurs and comments and jokes and attitudes and questions. But within my community, even then, I have memories of my friends, really. Because I wouldn't say much, and I would try to ignore it. But my friends would really stick up for me.
Mm.
But my mother couldn't keep me sheltered forever, and I went
Yeah.
off to overnight camp when I was 9 years old. And in overnight camp, not everybody was embracing. And at some point, I think it was my second year in overnight camp, somehow somebody at a barbecue burnt a hot dog. It was and started calling the hot dog Schwarze hot dog. The next thing you know, I was Schwarze hot dog.
Mm.
So that was probably the first nickname that really stuck with me that I recall from camp.
Mm.
And yeah, but it wasn't just, to be clear, it wasn't just the interactions, whether when I got into yeshiva or different places where I experienced the N word, or I experienced other racial slurs. Um, I think which might have had even a bigger impact, and as I'm talking to you, I'm processing this.
Mm.
I think what might have had a bigger impact was really the different people who I wanted to respect and I wanted to look up to over the different years. Some of them rabbis, some of them who were supposed to be my supervisors or people that I needed to account to, and they couldn't accept me, and
Mm.
they looked down at me.
Mhm.
I recall. I don't know if outside of my immediate family, I don't know if I've ever shared this, but I recall I studied yeshiva for many years in Israel. I found it myself much more at home over there. Again, I think it's because there's so much more color in Israel,
Mm.
and it's so much more diverse. Um, but I got involved in different communities, and I had some very close friends in the ultra religious community in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem, and somebody proposed a shidduch, for me to meet a girl. And but they asked, if I can meet their rav, their rabbi, who was not a Chabad rabbi. And that was one of the most horrible interactions I ever had. I
Mm.
recall just walking into his office, and he took one look at me, and I just knew this guy didn't accept me. It was that clear.
Wow.
It wasn't even
Wow.
necessarily the words he said. It was just the interview was over. He didn't even care what I had to say. He didn't even want to ask me any questions. It was over. It was done.
Hmm.
So those kind of experiences, um, you know, they have an impact.
Of
And
course.
it's not like that. It's also the preconceived notions. I have a lot of people, as I've come out and been more public about my being biracial. I've had many people, my alumni, parents of my alumni, colleagues, peers, students, um, other from far and large who tell me they didn't know. They had
Mm,
no idea that I was
mhm,
biracial. See, I look in the mirror and I see my nose, I see my face, I think I look biracial.
mm,
But a lot of them said, I never talked about it.
right.
Most of my alumni from 10 years ago definitely never heard anything from me. Now I talk openly about it with my students, but not then.
Mhm,
And they're like, "Hey, we had no idea. We just thought we didn't think." Some people never even
sure.
thought to think about it.
Right,
And actually, those are the people I love the most, the ones who
right.
don't think about it. But um, because it wasn't like talked about, I didn't go around saying to everybody, "Hey, I'm black." Um, as such, I know what people would say about the crime statistics and about this and about that and all
Mm,
these stereotypes that are often projected about the black community. Um, how do you think a black boy hearing that day in or often starts to wonder, is there some truth to that? Is that part of my identity? Is there something inherently different about me because I'm black?
of course. So how did you not internalize that? I mean, how did you stay so positive? How are you so positive? How did you just go on and do what you had to do and become a Chabad emissary? Like, how did that all like, what was the work that you did that helped you to not feel that way?
Um, First of all, I don't know that I managed not to. I mean, I did internalize it, and I don't know that I always managed in my own head to stay positive. Um, but but I really believe in every story, every interaction that I have, every I'll change the word to instead of mistake, misstep. Every time, I wonder like, you know, am I doing the right thing, or are we doing the
Mm,
right thing? I've seen the Rebbe's blessings. I mean, literally time and again, and I can go through some of them. But just our Chabad house and what we have today in our community, and I say this all the time: the Rebbe can't fail. So
mhm,
that wasn't a problem. The Rebbe's not going to fail. He put me in this position. He felt that I was the right keli, I was the right vessel for what he wanted in this setting, and I believe that. I believe in this setting. Um, I have the right mixed to work with my community here and with my students. So first of all, because of my flaws, I took a different approach to how I hope it's everybody's that way, but I really um, refuse to judge people. I mean, even when I
mm,
hear things that happened, even when I hear people that made horrible mistakes, um, I don't feel it's my place to judge them, as it says in Pirkei Avot, until you don't judge them unless you're in their footsteps, in their feet, in their shoes. So I really believe that, and I believe that because it was always done to me. I felt like I was judged a lot, so
mm,
I won't do it. To the extent where even sometimes my close family, like they'll make fun of me as being a liberal or whatever you want to
mm,
call me, but
mm,
I try to embrace everyone,
mm,
and going through my experiences growing up, in yeshiva, there was a boy that in yeshiva, we were 18 at the time, so it's at an age where a lot of mental illness comes out. People don't necessarily understand it, or don't know it, or don't even realize it yet. But there was a boy who became one of my best friends. Nobody can understand it. His behavior wasn't typical behavior. He was
mm,
later diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was going through a hard time, but that didn't matter to me. He's a phenomenal person, and I wish he didn't have the pains and struggles that he has to go through. But
mhm,
I never judged him, and I treated him the way I wanted to be treated, and I embraced him the way I want to be embraced. And I think that empathy and that love that I wanted and that I got from the Rebbe is what I've been able to impart with others. And that's why I think, thank God for the last 25 years, I've been able to help and try to make a difference for others.
mm,
For my own personal journey, I had to internalize what I already knew from Hasidus and one of my favorite discourses Hasidus is Derech Mitzvosecha, Mitzvos Avos Yisrael from the Tzemach Tzedek in the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and in which he says that we all have. We are all of infinite value because we have a part of God within us, and that's what I've been able to internalize. And I've been able to internalize the message of the Baal Shem Tov that if you see a flaw and a defect in someone else, it's just a reflection of yourself.
Mm.
So once I could start internalizing these messages, and yes, good therapist, and I recommend that for everyone. I was able to what I was able to recognize was that I have my blessings, that Hashem is giving me my blessings. I am who I am, and in fact, this empathy that I have, this love that I have, this acceptance that I have of other people, I don't know that I would have that if not for the fact that I grew up with biracial diversity. If I didn't have the diversity, or if I didn't have the negativity that was given, that was projected towards me, then maybe I would not have that same love or intense love that I really have for everybody that I meet. So
That's beautiful.
that helped. That really helped, make me who I am.
Right. That's really beautiful. Do, and I love the way how you overcame any feelings of flaws of who you are through the teachings of Hasidus, or at least tried to overcome. Wow, that's
The
beautiful.
journey, the
It's a
journey. Still
journey.
working on it.
It's a journey that I think applies to everyone. I mean, everyone has circumstances or issues in their lives, some more than others, but that they feel flawed in some way because of something that has happened to them. And that's important that, we can overcome it through those teachings. Wow, that's incredible. Um, how would you, like, what advice would you give to people about how to overcome racism?
That's a good question. As you were
Or even how to teach our children, not to be
right, that's what I was
racist.
about. That's where I wanted to go. As you were just mentioning, uh, the impact it had on me, and
Mhm,
how everybody has their experiences have an impact on them. I started to think about my children,
mhm.
and even with my children, it was a process. My oldest child, my son, he was maybe 11 years old when
So wait, so you
one of
wanna
my
tell us who you got married? You got married, you went through the whole system, you got married to somebody who is
I
who
got I went through the system. When it was time to get married, my wife, sorry, my mother tells me, "Okay, Yossi, you finished smicha. I was already teaching. Actually, Cheder Lubavitch was the first place that hired me out of rabbinical college. So they must have seen something in me."
Right.
And I was, my mother says, "Hey, ready to date?" And I was very hesitant. I was very nervous. I wasn't sure who was going to accept me. I didn't think it'd be easy, and I didn't really want the pain.
Mm.
But really, the first girl that I actually went out with, we connected right away. She'll tell you immediately upon meeting me, she knew that I was her bashert. That was the right person for her. And thank God, 26 years later, we have a beautiful family, 7 children, one son and 6 daughters. But Baruch
Wow.
Hashem, beautiful. I'm definitely my girls are definitely daddy's girls. As far as my wife, she herself um, grew up in a Sephardic home. Her father was a Yerushalmi by way of originally, I guess, Kurdistan in the Iraqi region,
Mm,
and her mother is Mexican, from Mexico, and they raised her from an early age, um, going to Chabad of Tarzana, to Chabad of the Valley in California. The Rabbi Josh Gordon Olvasham, but more directly, the Einbinders and Mayor Green, they were really the ones who were a huge influence on my wife. By the time
mm,
she was 13, she told her parents, and she went to Camp Gun Israel growing up. By the time she was 13, she said, "Hey, I'm gonna be I want to be a frum girl," and
wow.
with the help of Chabad, again, the Rebbe Shluchim, she was able to go to Jewish high school. She went to 12th grade at Beis Rivka, the Babbage Girls High School in New York. She went on to seminary, and then God put us together. And for her, it
Amazing.
was clear from day one we were going to be shluchim of the Rebbe. That's what we were going to do. But
Wow.
anyhow,
Yeah, going
it
back
came
to
to
your
my
children.
children. It
Right.
came to my children. My son, when he was about 11 years old, one of my extended relatives, keep it vague, um, told him, that his father was black. So my
Mm,
kids never noticed it. My kids didn't. It
mhm,
didn't occur to them why is Tati, why is our father darker than his siblings. My mother, my siblings never treated me differently. I was part of I am one and parcel with them. So that was an aha moment. I realized I got to at some point start talking to my kids about this.
mm,
The reason I did it was I was really trying to protect them. I didn't want them to go through some of my childhood experiences. I thought, what was my problem was my problem. Wouldn't necessarily become their problem. I was wrong.
mm,
But what I was able to do again with my own journey is my wife, and I have to give a lot of credit to my wife here. Is my children have been taught, and that's my message for anybody going through this. My kids have been taught that they're beautiful, that they're amazing, that just like the Baal Shem Tov says, that the flaw is not them. There's nothing
mm,
wrong with them. We are proud of who we are. We're proud of, and we're proud. We're proud of the fact that we're accepting and that we are inclusive, and that we don't see any reason to make distinctions between different people because of their color.
mm,
And my kids are very proud of that. And my kids, my wife from when they were young, would make a huge deal about how beautiful their thick curls were, their thick curly
mm.
hair. And to the point now that my eldest daughter, who has straight hair, is envious of the younger girls that all
Right,
have these big, lustrous curls. So we
right,
tell them to be proud of who they are. They're proud of my kids. Same thing. My lightest skinned kids will try to spend as much time in the sun to be darker so they can be like the rest of the siblings because
right.
they think, they think that they, I agree. I have a beautiful family. They're
Right.
biracial roots coming from Mexico, Kurdistan, Black, Europe, Aztec, Indian, even. I mean, all of that is we have beautiful children, and we
You
teach them
embrace
that.
that.
We instill in them, and we embrace it. And my kids, not only do they embrace it, they have become advocates when they go through experiences that I had. They're
Mm,
outspoken.
mhm,
While when I was a kid, or sometimes even now, when somebody would use certain words in front of them, in front of me, I kept quiet, or I
mhm,
didn't comment. Or when somebody would say something derogatory, I didn't say anything. I just kept quiet, even if it wasn't directed towards me.
mm,
My kids, and that's changed by the way, but my kids,
mhm,
no, we all, including my children, we speak up.
mhm,
We will tell people. It could be a teacher, it could be a peer, it could be a student, it could be a counselor. We will say, that's racially insensitive. That is
mhm.
wrong, and we won't put up with that. And my kids, I'm very very proud of them. They are remarkable young. Most of them adults now, but I have remarkable children, and I live out tremendous nachas through them.
Amazing. Wow, really amazing. What made you decide to come forth with your story at this time? Like, to make it more public? Mm,
I've been working on this for a while. When I first really started to explore my feelings and explore my journey, explore who I was. Like I said, I started. I actually spoke to a psychologist in the West Hartford community, Andy Megan, a friend of mine. It was clear he was not going to be able to be my therapist. We're good friends, but I asked him for advice, who I can go to, and I told him why, and he recommended to me this Dr. Khan, Michael Khan, not religious, not from, but he's someone who, and I don't think I could have gone to somebody religious. I didn't have that trust for somebody religious to really understand and to
mhm,
really be accepting because of my own experiences.
mm,
And he really, he himself was somebody who had been an advocate in the civil rights movement, someone who really really likes to learn and judge, and learn about people, doesn't judge anyone. And he became he really helped me. And he told me he thought that, hey, I have an important message that maybe I could help others if I could share my message, but I wasn't ready even then.
mhm,
But during that process, might have been his encouragement, I went to another mentor of mine who always embraced me since I was 6 years old, and that was Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, a prominent Rav and scholar in Chicago.
Mm.
And he also, in our conversations, told me, and then with him, I had to speak to him, and I guess that would take more time to elaborate, but I had to speak with him to discuss some of the teachings that I had learned in Torah and among the Mefarshim commentaries that were maybe perhaps feeding my shame,
Mm.
and he helped me with that too, and because with his brilliance was able to really help me reframe the narrative and understand it. But he also told me the same thing. He said, "Hey, you have a message." He said that he told me that I think they'll be part of your journey to help and share your message with others. But I took my
Incredible.
time. I started doing some writing, this and that, and eventually I said, "Okay, I'm ready."
And really amazing. What just as a parting thought, what would you like to leave us with? What message would you like our listeners to hear and to take from this interview?
The Lubavitch Rebbe didn't just practice, but he embodied unconditional love. This idea that every single person is a precious diamond, um, and the Rebbe never showed any nuance or never showed any difference to anyone. Um, Everybody was embraced, everybody was loved unconditionally. And if we want to embody the Rebbe's message, if we want to be live in the Rebbe's vision, if we want the world to be the way the Rebbe envisioned, the world of peace and harmony and goodness, world of redemption where everyone can get along, we've got to embrace that message. If
Mm.
we have to look at each other equally, even those who are not Jewish, even those who seem very different than us. We have to realize they're here for a reason too. They have blessings too. They have infinite value too. And together, if we can believe that one person at a time, we can make monumental change. I really believe that.
Wow, like Mashiach times. That would really be messianic, redemptive times. Beautiful.
I think that I think that's the future.
That's the future. Amazing. Rabbi Kulik, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us your incredible journey and your incredible story and your incredible strength in overcoming the difficulties of the past to embracing this beautiful teachings as you are trying to teach the world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, I loved that interview with Rabbi Kulek. I just found him so fascinating, his whole story and journey, absolutely amazing. I love the message that he's teaching us about racism, but an even deeper message is that how he overcame and how he so honestly portrays how he overcame this feeling of being a flawed individual, being a flawed human being, because he was internalizing so much of the messages that he was given from young childhood, the racism that was projected against him and how people viewed him, and how it took a lot of work, inner work. And you could see the strength of that inner work that he's now able to finally speak about his story. But through the teachings of Hasidus, he was able to understand a deeper aspect of himself and see himself as this beautiful soul, as this perfect soul that is not blemished. And I also loved, especially, how he took that his past circumstances and the difficulties and struggles that he went through and used it as a springboard to become who he became. So that now, when he looks at people and he sees individuals around him, he doesn't see them by their mistakes. He doesn't see them by their colors. He doesn't see them by who they different external aspects of themselves, but he sees deeper and he doesn't judge. And I thought that was just a really beautiful example of taking our past, taking the struggles that we've gone through, and not just overcoming them, but actually using them to become the people that we can become, to become stronger, better human beings. Of course, I loved as well and you could just almost envision the picture of him in the Rebbe's study and the Rebbe showering him with the love as a 4-year-old. And I'm sure that that love has helped him to project that love on himself as well as on others in the function that he is as a shliach, teaching so many Jewish people. So I thought that his message was really, really incredible. If you enjoy watching these videos, I hope that you are subscribed, Chabad.org/extraordinary. I hope you watch us as well on Spotify, on Apple. We're available on all podcast platforms, and you can watch us while you do your work in your home. Leave us a line, drop us a line, tell us what you think. Give us a heart, give us a love. We love to hear from you, and it just really makes our day. And I do want to share with you something that just came in my email just today, some feedback from a reader that really made my day, and I thought you'd enjoy hearing it as well. Let me share it with you. Every now and then, I'm home working and I'll listen to your interviews. I'm impressed with the faith of the people and the way they are dealing with everything. I realize the interviews are having an effect on me because when I talk to other people, I hear myself quoting people from your interviews. Wow, that's incredible. Again and again, I keep finding these one-liners and I say, I needed to hear that, or I wanted to share that with another person. Know that your work has a bigger impact than you'll ever know. Wow, that's so nice to hear. It makes my day when I hear these kind of comments. And I just thank you all for being so much a part of our extraordinary community. Thank you for listening.